And whenever it suits them, I'm Muslim and I'm Arab, right? But other than that, they want to be like the West. They want to be like the Americans. So they play, both sides whenever it suits them. So sometimes, I'm especially when they want to sound interesting to their non-Muslim friends. Oh, I'm from here, and I'm Mediterranean or whatever. I never understood really. But other than that, when it comes to Islam, like no, like that's too extreme. We need to just be more moderate, kind of just blend in.
Welcome to the 23rd episode of the 4th podcast. My name is Ali Wazir.
My name is Ibrahim Ali.
And my name is Talha Muhammad.
My name is Eyad Al-kobri.
Yeah, we have with us today Shaykh Eyad Al-kobri. Welcome to the 4th podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
وإياكم.
So, Shaykh, it was an honor to have you on our podcast. Maybe could you tell us a little bit about yourself and like where your life has taken you so far?
Okay, it's not that interesting, but I was born in the U.S. In St. Louis, Missouri. Really moved to North Carolina when I was a baby still. I lived in North Carolina for more than 20 years of my life. From kindergarten to my bachelor's there in North Carolina. I came to Texas in 2015, and so it's been like 5-6 years here. I was in Arlington originally, and then I moved to Fort Worth, and I've actually been in Fort Worth for over 5 years. So I guess 6 years altogether in Texas or so. I work at a masjid, of course, Masjid Rahimi in Fort Worth. I've been working there for over 5 years. I really more or less am in charge of helping run the masjid. I'm one of 2 employees. There's a senior imam, and you can call me, there's different titles, assistant imam, administrative, something like that. We work together in running the masjid. So that entails a lot of different things, whether just events or khutbahs or talks, lectures, interfaith, Sunday school, janazas, everything and anything. So that, whatever is needed to do, whether it's lead prayer, khutbah, talk, lecture, interfaith. I'm even the vice principal in Sunday school upstairs. So we just have to get it done. So that's kind of in short, and there's more details with regard to that as well. Married, I have a daughter, 4 years old. That's pretty much probably the more interesting thing.
So, in this episode, or in our podcast in general, we focus on, like we were talking about before we started, like the colonized mentality, and how it manifests itself in different aspects of the Muslim, our Muslim life. And I know that you're very involved with the masjid and helping run it. So we wanted to kind of talk about in this episode. And just touch on this topic as well as some other topics, but mainly we want to talk about how the colonized mentality affects or how it's manifested itself in our masajid.
Yeah, it's really sad to see. And it's something that's spoken about. That's probably the biggest problem. Many just live it and don't really understand. And living here your whole life, I was actually, I was able to visit overseas a lot, in particular Jordan and Palestine. Probably Jordan 5 times or so in my life, Palestine maybe 4 or so times. So I really saw that other side, and I really had a lot of culture growing up, right? Specifically from my mother and her side, where I was exposed to that culture with the language and things that they did and said and ate, and so I had the best of both worlds. It's you even see it directly from your parents and your uncles. Firstly, the struggles they faced. Especially if you want to kind of just focus on the Palestinians in particular. They branched out all over, forced out into Jordan, to Kuwait, They ended up in America. I mean, just all around, and they really even lost their identity to some extent, especially the newer generation. They're just kind of far removed.
I mean, you bring up a good point about like I guess we can kind of delve into this a little bit, but like the Palestinian American like dilemma, for example, is a good topic because I know it's relevant as well because quite recently the issues in Syria, I'm sorry, in Palestine were going on, and there was a whole lot of protests going on around the country. And I happened to attend two of the protests in Dallas, and both of them were like massive in scale, and I could you could really gauge kind of the issues that are plaguing our Muslim community. First and foremost, like a lack of awareness of like actual like what the issues are, and I think number two is like a lack of religious understanding and what's permissible, what's impermissible, and like how to approach these issues and solve them from an Islamic paradigm. So like when I went to these protests, there was people, like shoulder to shoulder with like the opposite gender. Lots of people not wearing hijab. Well, I mean, forget about not wearing hijab, like immodestly dressed, and also like doing debka together, and like so like it kind of brings up two different points, right? So like one is this religiously correct, and why is it so far removed from like our understanding of the Sunnah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And number two is this actually going to help the people of Palestine?
Yeah, it's a problem we've been facing for a while now, and really the thing about Palestine, I mean, it's home to what consensus of the scholars of Islam says the third most holiest place, Beit al-Maqdis in particular. So the Palestinians, obviously, they get a lot of focus because all the Muslims, as a Muslim, you have to care about Palestine, right? And then they kind of, for whatever reason, maybe kind of believe their own hype, if you will, and they kind of think that they're actually maybe a little more special. And really, I mean, it's the place. It's about Islam bigger than your land. I'm from this place, so this place is dear to my heart. This place is dear to the heart of all the Muslims, right? The 2 billion or so worldwide. So it's bigger than that, right? It's not superficial, where we just care about like, well, I'm from there. My grandparents are from there. We have land there, right? And you see many people, and we can't say protests are necessarily wrong, but are you doing the important things though? Like do you actually pray firstly? Right? Do you make dua? Do you go about it the right way? And it's really just emotion. I'm Palestinian, and they took our land, and many of them you actually find never actually been to Palestine. Right? It's really interesting. So they have all of these catchphrases and things that they say, and they don't actually know much about Palestine. So again, even like Syrians are going to have to some aspect, that even Yemenis now and different, people that are struggling. I mean, all the Muslims are really just turmoil, subhanAllah, but the Palestinians are shown a special type of attention because it is Palestine. Like, it's talked about, the third, holiest site in Islam. So, when they get all that attention, they're like, okay, they kind of get with it, and it becomes this like emotional roller coaster for them. And really, I came across one person one time saying, I heard him say like specifically, how is Allah allowing this to happen? Right? I kind of just looked at him like, right? And what I knew about that person, and again, it's not, that I'm better or, we're looking down on people, but his Islamic like understanding definitely wasn't there, especially with tawakkul and qadr and so on. But also his practice wasn't there. So it's really just sad how, and this is really what I mean. America amongst them and Britain, France, they want us to think like this, nationalistic, right? This is my land, right? Separate, and conquer just everyone. I'm Jordanian, I'm Palestinian, I'm Yemeni, I'm Saudi, I'm Kuwaiti. Like, no, it's bigger than that, right? It's really become superficial. Even I don't even, bring up Palestine a lot because it's just kind of used as just kind of this filler, right? It's bigger than that. So the Palestinians and all Muslims need to understand that.
Yeah, Chef, just to kind of touch upon that.
Yeah.
We dive straight into like the Palestinian issue. Going back to colonized mentality specifically from within the dynamic of psychology, for example, a child growing up gets influence from their parents at a young age, right? Sees them as a role model, sees them as their number one influences. For example, growing up, a child might see their father as Superman or their mother as like queen of the world. And this is a perfectly normal thing for a child to have. And then as the child grows and develops and even enters elementary school, pre-K, they start to develop friendships, and their social influence now becomes their friends. And then from their friends, now we live in a digital age. So when a child hits around 12 or 13 years of age, they start becoming more socially influenced by the news, their feed that they see on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and larger social influences. So from a colonized mindset, I mean, if you have parents, as you mentioned, if you have parents that perhaps are not practicing in the first place, the child from the onset is most likely going to have a dearth of the right mindset, correct? Mm. So I guess for us, specifically within like the colonized mindset, I know we talked about Palestine, but just generally in America, you yourself, having mentioned that you grew up here, from what I know of you went through the public school system.
Yeah.
Through your own anecdotal experience, what have you seen for Muslims specifically? How can we possibly kind of alter our lenses and put on some new perspective?
Yeah, it's a lot can be said, subhanAllah, especially if you're going to talk about school system, for example. It's just a jungle. Growing up, trying to find that acceptance. Really, what you find, you're not really accepted here. And then when you go visit overseas, you're the American, right? So it's a really interesting thing. Like, you really just don't know. And many people actually, they do a lot more to be accepted, and they really fall into a lot of things. Especially you find that the ones that come from overseas directly and start, up in schools and so on. And they try harder than the Americans here, right? And to their detriment, of course. Obviously it's really important that the parents are there to establish that Islamic identity. And really, to be honest though, why did the Muslims end up in America, right? I doubt many came, and again, we don't know what's in the hearts, but they came for Islam or to spread Islam, right? It's more, religious freedom, whatever that means.
Or economic opportunity.
Economic opportunity, of course. So that's the reality. So they're here, they're just trying to kind of be in their own like little bubble, work, make it, put you through school. Everything to them is school and money and so on. And that's what success is, right? And, for me growing up, we had Sunday school, for example. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best. And you really had to kind of find yourself throughout, especially going to public school, 8 hours a day. Right? Who's always going to win that battle, 8 hours versus maybe 2 hours with your parents or so, and then sleep and homework and all that. And your dad is probably working like the whole day, and your mom was just trying to take care of everyone, for example. And like you said about, my dad really was kind of my Superman figure. But again, it's even when I really started taking on Islam, I really was seen kind of like weird, like, okay, we've always kind of prayed and so on, but like you're kind of maybe being a little extreme. It's like, no, I'm just trying to do the bare minimum. Like, you pray, go to the masjid and so on. Yeah, but, there's people out and people would joke, especially, this is Muslims, not like, even like family members. We start practicing, they'll call you even things like ISIS and, wow. I remember some Egyptians would call me Ikhwan, right? Ikhwan, they're really ignorant, right? And I wasn't even really familiar with. I was like, I had to look Well, I heard some things about them, but I didn't really know. But anyway, not to get into like all that, but you're seeing again, it's just Muslim. I'm not even focused about non-Muslims. They're going to have their own like misconceptions that are just out there. But Muslims in particular, they're going to give you the hardest time, especially when your whole life you were a certain way. All of a sudden you're different. Like this is kind of and they want you to believe that this moderate Islam, right? What does it mean to be moderate? Okay, you pray, maybe go to Jum'ah, kind of just do. And it's like, that's not even the bare minimum, though. Like, I'm just trying to do the bare minimum. And especially with some Arabs, right? If you just really pray 5 times a day, have like a beard and maybe wear like a thobe, you're sheikh like instantly, like no exaggeration, right? From the time I started praying again, I was instantly called sheikh. Like, that's it. Like, I didn't know anything, zero about Islam. Like, it's just, and that's the reality. And no exaggeration about it. And it really goes back to the colonized, mindset and mentality, where, again, if you look at these Arab countries, right? I guess they're called Islamic countries, right? The agenda of the West was really to take out Islam as much as possible, right? And to stress, the medical field and, to be a lawyer, to be an engineer. And if you don't cut it out as, one of those, top professions, and what do you settle for? Islam, right? So you'll find, and I've met many people here, they said they study Islam overseas. I'm just looking like, and again, we're not here to judge people, we're not better than people, but they're talking and they seem like normal, like but they had to study something. Like their grades were not good enough to be, a doctor, for example. So the lowest level of grade, they had to settle for Islam, right? So they come here and they say have a bachelor's in some type of Islamic thing, and you're just trying to understand. It doesn't make any sense, and you try to explain that to converts. Converts just don't understand that concept. Like, what do you mean you're studying Islam and you're from Saudi Arabia, for example, and you're not religious? Like, it doesn't make sense, right? And that's of course why we judge the religion itself and not people, or we're going to have a lot of problems.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I grew up in Saudi, and in most families, you take the smart kids will go to university in America, and the dumb kids will go to some Islamic university in Saudi Arabia. So that is what it is. And you're very right. Ultimately, the aim of the colonizing forces was to reduce Islam within the population because it's a unifying force, right? If people are Muslims and they're going to unify not just with each other, but with people across the made-up borders as well, right? Then an Algerian won't feel separate from a Moroccan, and a Palestinian won't feel separate from a Jordanian if they're more tied to Islam than their national identity. But it's very much in the interest of the colonizer to force that national identity, as made up as it may be, down your throat. So on that topic of division, how do you see correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of South Asian Muslims, Desi Muslims, will perceive Arabs as having a superiority complex over them. Like, we're better than a Desi or an African Muslim just because we speak the language or some dialect of the language natively, and it gives us a greater right to the religion, even if we don't do as much as them. Like, have you seen this, or am I being, do I have a victim complex myself?
That's very much correct. Yeah, it's sad to see, even a layman Arab, he'll even criticize a scholar of Islam that might still struggle with some pronunciation of words, which is going to be natural.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's that colonized mentality. It's just just me, and look at me and look where I'm from, and and whenever it suits them, I'm Muslim and I'm Arab, right? But other than that, they want to be like the West. They want to be like the Americans. So they play, both sides whenever it suits them. So sometimes, especially when they want to sound interesting to their, non-Muslim friends, I'm from here and, I'm Mediterranean or whatever. I never understood really, but other than that, when it comes to Islam, no, that's too extreme. We need to just be more moderate, kind of just blend in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Kind of coming back to the Palestinian plight that Ibrahim had mentioned originally, and also the topic of finding that modern, reformed Islam of sorts, and then also the geopolitical issues of imaginary borders that have now fractioned our ummah into what it is today. It's just really interesting to see, kind of like this three-pronged approach, and I'm sure there's more prongs to it, to divide the ummah and conquer, literally. But going back to the concept of being a moderate Muslim, because I know it's slightly tangential, but nowadays you see individuals toss out the word like a conservative Muslim, or, I'm a moderate Muslim, and then you have, from the other end of the spectrum, liberal Muslims, right?
Yeah.
And I remember, subhanAllah, I actually heard this a while back, but there's a brother, he's not a scholar, may Allah bless him, but he was just mentioning, like, what is the concept of, like, being moderate in Islam? And then he just laid it was really deep, because he laid it out. He was like, the Prophet ﷺ is your perfect example, right? He never went too extreme in his ibadat, right? He never went too extreme in anything. Perfect example for you, the best of creation. And he prayed in the nighttime. And he fasted on Mondays and Thursdays. And he fasted 3 days, of the month. And so on and so forth. And he fulfilled the rights of everyone, and so on and so forth. And he listed out all the ibadat that the Prophet ﷺ did. And then all of his actions, all of his sunnah. And then he said, if you think that is extreme, if you think that's conservative, then the problem is with you, it's not with Islam. And I was like, yo, subhanAllah, like that really hit me. It's like, for example, going back to the Palestinian plight, we go to protests, hypothetically. I mean, I haven't, but I know Green Man protest.
Bro, you put it out yourself.
So, going back to that, Allahu Alam, I mean, like, hypothetically, would it not be more beneficial? I remember I was talking to one of our prior individuals on the podcast, Ustad Isa, and he was mentioning to me, like, dua is sufficient. And regarding that, dua is sufficient. And I was like, I never really thought about, how much we should emphasize, the prayer, the night prayer, qiyam and tahajjud and so on and so forth, regarding the issues that we're facing with. And it just kind of really shook me that we don't turn towards these paths that Allah has given us to kind of seek solutions to the problems that we have, but we want to turn to, like, man-made forms of activism per se. And I'm not saying that protesting is like I don't know, Allah, right? I'm not going to say it's bad or good. I don't know, right? I'm not a scholar.
We're about to get fatwa.
but yeah, it just always hit me how, like, we go to these protests and we blast music, and then we do dabkir, and then we do we dance with non-Muhammadans, and it's like, how can you expect barakah and success when you're doing things that are not pleasing to Allah, right? And it was just kind of hit me.
Yeah, and the problem is mixing culture, with Islam, like, to the point that we don't know which is which. And really the most interesting thing is, especially, I mean, I've seen it from, family, friends, and people you grow up with and that that never really maybe studied the religion formally. They'll tell you things are haram, and it's like far from it. Like, it's not even close. So you kind of, or they'll tell you something is halal that everyone probably said is haram. Like, they just, I don't know, it's just a mixture. And again, that goes back to what, the West wanted, just to kind of have Islam like that. I mean, that's kind of course, one of the main reasons that they wanted the Ottoman Empire to fall. I mean, that was really, even though it was weak towards the end, I mean, it was really an important part of the Islamic identity to have that caliphate there. Once it fell, I mean, it was just for the taking. They can just divide and conquer at that point. But it's really even like when we're talking about, like, the Arabic language, for example, right? How important is the Arabic language? This is really what of the biggest attacks, from the West with regards to Islam, is the Arabic language. Why? Because that's what unites everyone, right? Even like you'll find the news. What I've always liked is you see the news in Arabic that everyone understands, right? It's not Palestinian Arabic. It's not Egyptian Arabic. It's not Moroccan Arabic. It's not Yemeni Arabic. It's Arabic that everyone. It's not even more classical. I think they call it modern standard.
Modern standard,
right? Right. This is really what unites the Arabs, right? So anybody can pick up that newspaper. Everyone understands, right? So what do they want to do? They want to attack that, right? Because they know if they take out Arabic, then you can just English, Turkish, whatever language, Urdu, and that identity is gone, right? So Arabic, we mentioned like Arabic before, how, obviously Arabs might look down on others. I mean, Arabic is huge, and it's bigger than it's bigger today than it probably was back then, because Islam was, I mean, we had the great scholars of Islam, for example. Today's scholarship just isn't there like before. So we need to hold on to that by holding on to the Arabic and the Quran. That's really the ticket to preserving the religion itself and preserving the next generations.
And it's important for more than just Arabs. Like, it's important for all Muslims, right? I mean, I remember hearing an anecdote by Shaykh Eyad Al-kobri, who's a South Asian Muslim. When he went to China, he was speaking with some Chinese Muslim scholars over there in Arabic. It's the unifying language for the whole ummah, of course, which makes a lot of sense why getting rid of that in some sense would be beneficial, right? If you were able to replace it with English or French, it'd be a very good thing for the colonizers.
Yeah, man, I remember, like when I first became interested in the deen, there's an ayah in Surah Yusuf. Allah just says, "Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyyan la'allakum taqilun," right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, this was, I guess, kind of that victim complex, right? Kind of like that inferiority complex that's all you mentioned. Where like, I was like, yo, dude, I gotta, obviously, like, it was kind of like me mixing religion with like my own myopic version of what Islam was. So I used to only listen to Salafi scholars back in the day. Like, I used to be like, yo, dude, like, these guys, because like they used to have YouTube videos, right? It'd be in Arabic, and then they have like the English translation, right? And I'd be like, yo, dude, I gotta hit this real quick. So I'd do it. I listened to it, bro, and I was like, yo, I thought it was super deep. I was like, yo, these topics are super deep, bro. You're speaking Arabic, like, it's next level, right? And then, as you learn more, which still is nothing, but I think as you learn, you kind of realize, like, there is still some benefit to these ulama that are speaking, obviously, in English, right? And you can still derive, some of the benefits and the knowledge from them. And I just feel like that inferiority complex kind of happens to a lot of South Asians and people from the subcontinent, where like you look at a lot of it's because of like their Arabic. Now that I've learned a little bit, but like when you learn Arabic and classical Arabic, you kind of like look at Arabs that come from like different places of the world, and you realize like some can speak Arabic, but they don't know how to read the Quran. Like, I know brothers, like, they're fluent in Arabic, like, they can speak it, bro. Like, they're from Palestine, they're from like Jordan, Syria, so on, but like they can't read the Quran. And I'm like, yo, like, for me, it's like, what benefit is that? Like, it's ajib, it's odd, man. It's kind of, but yeah, I used to have that inferiority complex, man.
Yeah. No, a lot of us do, for sure. If I can pivot back to the earlier point, which was mosques in America, it's actually something that I'm really curious about, and I think all three of us are, and we'd like an insider's perspective, if you don't mind. How do you feel about the structure of the mosques and the responsibilities that are put on such few people? Like, do you think it's an efficient system to have one or two people wearing all the hats in the mosque and everybody else kind of divided by it? Like, I'd just love to hear an insider perspective on how mosques are structured in this country and what can be done better.
Yeah, the biggest problem with mosques, one has to ask, who are the ones in charge at a mosque, right? And of course there's employees, and there's going to be a limited number of employees, but the ones in charge are always going to be volunteers. And why is that significant? Because what is a volunteer? Like, one that, volunteers their service. That means they don't actually have to be there, right? So how can you expect a lot from a volunteer? Right, so a volunteer did like 25%, like, you're going to thank them for that. That's extra. Like, they didn't have to do that, right? But you need 100%, like even more than 100%, to run like, something as important as a mosque, right? Because I know they're not going to put little amount of work into their profession, for example, if they're doctors or engineers. But when it comes to Islam or like mosques, and that's why things are, even slower to get done. Because, I mean, you have volunteers coming together, like, which might take months to kind of get everybody on the same page, or even just to meet, and, just like no drive really. And obviously it comes back to intention. And again, we don't know what's in the hearts, but one does have to ask at times, like, what is, why are you here? Like, are we here for the sake of Allah? But sometimes it kind of seems like there's probably something a little bit more. But as long as volunteers are in charge, over 90% of the mosque being run by volunteers, I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster, and what I believe anyway, what I've seen, and they're going to have more power than the employees, which are actually have to be there. So it's a formula that doesn't really make sense to me, and it never really has. I mean, from a financial perspective, I mean they can't pay like all these board members, shoulder members, all that. Probably just pay 2 or 3 employees. That makes sense. But again, I mean, you need to have that drive there. You need to have that dedication. But it's like, well, if I don't have to be there, then I mean, you're not gonna. You can only expect so much.
Right, sure. How about fund allocations? Are they done efficiently, or like in terms of why can't they just hire more people so that they have people on the roster putting in 100%?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, the funds aren't there.
Okay.
Like how churches run in other places. I mean, we're just donations. So as much money as that comes in, I mean, you have to pay for, I mean, electricity and janitorial services and trash pickup and electricity. And it just adds up, and you want to pay, your employees a good salary. But of course, that you can only pay them so much because, I mean, how much, and again, some mosques have more resources than others, but I'm kind of just speaking about what I know generally. So, I mean, they try their best to allocate the funds accordingly, but, again, it's just different perspectives coming together to try to come to one decision, right? And that decision is always, I mean, it's interesting really because it's just, again, coming from volunteers, people that are just happen to be upon this board, they're making all the decisions ultimately. I mean, what qualifications do they have possibly to make that decision? Or maybe no one else wanted to do it, so they just happen to be there. So it's just, again, you can kind of see it's kind of just a recipe for disaster.
Mm. Yeah. We also have like a little bit of a newer phenomenon here, especially in Dallas, I think, which has a very affluent Muslim community out in the suburbs of mega mosques, right?
Yeah.
And these monoliths, mashallah, multi-million-dollar buildings and everything that goes on like that. How do you feel, or what have you seen really in your experience in terms of who gets admission into these mosques? Like it seems like the richer and bigger mosques get, the more exclusive they get. At least anecdotally, I've seen this in terms of maybe not letting in African American Muslims. Like having discriminatory policies towards anybody. Maybe coming in smelling of weed.
Yeah.
As you might expect,
Yeah.
and just kind of segregating mosques in that nature, where you have. In a lot of metropolitan areas in the United States now, old, poor mosques in the urban cores, and then these rich mega mosques, multi-million-dollar buildings out in the suburbs that serve very different demographics.
Yeah, and really, there's a lot of different ways to approach that point. But one thing to consider is a person that comes to the mosque. He's only as good as what he provides to the mosque, right? So you're pretty much like a walking dollar sign. How much do you contribute?
Mm-hmm.
And the big donors are known, right? So they're going to be shown the love. And everyone else, I mean, they're not going to be treated badly, but they're just certain politics with regards to that, right? And then after that, if it's not like monetary, then it's okay. Are you going to volunteer and help? So if you're not doing both of those, then you come, you don't come, it doesn't really matter. But of course, we want you to come because it shows that we have a lot of activity, right? People are coming in and out, and it looks good for us. But ultimately, I mean, it's just it's run like a business.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, kind of just on that point, whenever it suits one, it's for the sake of Allah, and whenever it suits them, it's a business, right? So whatever the agenda they're trying to accomplish at that time. It's for the sake of Allah, brother. It's like, it's a business ultimately. So which one is it? So maybe sometimes it's both or one or the other. Just depends how they're feeling.
Mm. And what can we learn from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in terms of how a mosque should be run? Like what can we do to come closer to that ideal?
It just starts with intention. You need to really purify intention 100%. right? I mean, for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, even an employee, you're not going to work for a mosque for money, like ultimately. I mean, it's just, like, how much are you going to get paid at a mosque? Like if you have a degree, for example, you could have been an engineer, you could have been this and that and made, pretty good money. So you're here for the sake of Allah. So if you're not there for the sake of Allah, then just get out. Like you're really just, helping your case for not for Jannah, for the opposite side, for Jahannam, really. Because, I mean, again, you're responsible for so much that goes on that it's not small. Like it's such a big matter that people take lightly, and they're going to be held accountable, right? You're going to be held accountable for every single thing you do. So you really need to check yourself, like, before it's too late.
So also going back to the topic of like a shura, for example, and also like the mega masajid, the three of us at least being from like the Dallas suburb community for the last few years. When it comes to the shura, what exactly are the qualifications for those that are on it? Because it seems, from my own experience, it seems as though many times, and I'm not hating on the uncles that run the shura, may Allah bless them. They're trying the best they can with what they got, generally speaking, right? But from my limited knowledge, it would make sense that you have individuals that are knowledgeable in regards to Islam running the house of Allah, right? So specifically from a shura perspective, what would, from your anecdotal experience and also your knowledge of the religion, what would you say in regards to that?
So the qualifications, to be frank, generally are zero, right? To be president, I think you have to be a vice president or on the shura like 1 or 2 terms, or different masajid have different rules, but something like that. But generally, it's just, okay, look, like we, by the constitution of the mosque, we need to have a certain amount of people to be on the shura or board. So like, just come, right? So it's it's really that easy. Like it's like. And the person's like, oh, well, I'm kind of busy or whatever. It's like, no, I just one meeting every like month or two, and maybe a WhatsApp message or something. Like, it's actually more than that, but that's how they get people to kind of volunteer for that, not realizing how big the responsibility is, right? And with regards to Islamic knowledge, you'll find, and it's based on what I know. Maybe I know a different situation, but most of the people in the boards in shura, their Islamic knowledge is really limited. Right, to say the least. That should be one of the top, qualifications. At least have something. And of course, the uncle or auntie that probably was a part of the measure for 20, 30 years, caught maybe 100 khutbahs or something. They probably think that they're, they kind of know 1 or 2 things, but that's obviously not real Islamic knowledge. They probably caught a couple of seminars and khatiras, and they think that, okay, I know more than most. But knowing more than most isn't like a scale that we look at. So it's really 2 things. So firstly, no Islamic knowledge, and then no qualifications to lead. Right. This is just like a person that probably picked up engineer, or someone that's in IT. But like what they have any type of leadership experience? What did they do to actually give them this leadership role? So it's a question to be asked, and that's probably the problem with most masajid actually.
Another thing that I've run across in my limited time of being like involved with masajids, mega masajids specifically in the DFW community, is that a lot of the times the imams of the community are very much limited by what they can say and what they can do and handle different situations because of the board. So I was wondering if you could like speak on that.
Oh, this is huge problem. Because imam is the one that leads or one that is followed, right? But today it's just really become one that leads prayer, and maybe gives a talk or something like that. But actually, when it comes to decision making, you'd be lucky to get one imam that's at least consulted on 1 or 2 matters, probably. And that's just based on what I've known, and maybe I'll know different situations. But the imam is the one that we should be following. But in reality, they're just followers, right? And they have to be, because they have families, and I gotta make my salary and so on. So there's a lot of politics, and you can't really blame them necessarily. They want to just do as much good as possible, and of course take care of their families at the same time. But yeah, they aren't given the freedom that they should be given, especially classically.
Yeah, I would have to actually kind of just reflecting on my community. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. That's subhanAllah, like imams in general don't get like the say that they would have classically, and it's frustrating for sure for them. It's frustrating for their students, who see that happening to them. Like all of us have seen shuyukh and imams that get honestly disrespected, right? Like from within their own communities, and so it's not a fun side of it all.
I mean, now we have a weird new trend of like a mega mosque perhaps wanting to bring in a celebrity imam, for the name. We're gonna cut that.
I had to do it.
You gotta build a brand, baby.
I was thinking of Fatah. Oh my God. What? I was at Click last weekend in Houston, Clear Lake Islamic Center, who had hired Fatah Sefrajic to be their imam for to lead prayers for a while, just
I did not
just
know that.
just
No clue.
yeah, just based on his voice, and it's a weird thing where maybe they'll even discard somebody who's put their blood and sweat and tears into building that community in the first place in order to bring in a catchier name for more donations and a larger YouTube subscriber count.
You gotta get them YouTube plaques, bro.
Yeah, they'll drop someone in a heartbeat if it means, expansion, more funds, and obviously it's not going to be advertised like that, but that's the reality. Like, bigger name, celebrity name. That's really where it's at.
What big picture solutions do you see that we can change? Maybe in the long term, in the next couple decades? Because alhamdulillah, we're not that old yet. So we have some time in front of us, and I would like to dedicate it to improving. Obviously,
I mean, it's a problem plaguing the ummah itself, really. And really, it starts with empowering the youth. And then when, they get into these leadership positions, you really, allow them to advance. But if you keep them in this shell, there's only so much, room to expand. And even going back to like an imam, the imam is there, and you see like these kind of strange restrictions they have on them. Like imam probably wants to kind of do their own things. Like, no, you have to stay there for all 5 prayers. You have to have these hours where you're available for the people, right? This isn't like, it's just like, and that's why you find many of the people that should be imams don't want to be imam, right? Some of these it's like, well, why don't you go to like this imam that, mashallah, knowledge and really, down to earth and relates. It's like, no, I don't want anything to do with that, right? So they're getting these people that maybe aren't even qualified, but let's say they are qualified, but they're willing to, put up with all that. Again, the restrictions, they want like this back home imam type thing, and it's like, especially if you get the younger imams, they're not down with all of this. Like, you have to stay for the 5 prayers. That's not realistic. And maybe 6 days a week. It's like, no, you need to give maybe 1 or 2 days off, and allow for some flexibility. Maybe they want to go give khutbah here. Maybe they want to travel to another masjid. But if you just keep them locked up, the imams that you want to be imam don't want to be imam.
Wow. Yeah. No, I feel that. In my peer group, alhamdulillah, we have some boys who are real knowledgeable. They've gone ahead and got ijazat. First of all, hufad, of course, in multiple qira'at. We went ahead and got ijazat in many mutun and fiqh and ulum al-hadith and all that. And none of them says they want to be an imam. Not a single one.
No.
Even now, some mosques, when they feel the squeeze, they'll raise pay, and some places are lucrative now. That's the reality of it. But just the total lack of freedom has turned away every single one of the ones that I have the fortune to be associated with.
Exactly.
Something that I've also kind of seen too, going back to the topic of the colonized mindset, and also how we deal with our imams, our communities. I know Shaykh Eyad, he mentioned kind of cultivating the youth, right? To help them, stand on their own 2 feet in regards to the community, in regards to how they can improve the community. But something that I noticed recently, and I've always seen it, but I guess the veil has kind of been lifted from my eyes regarding it because I've seen it more prominently, is how the colonized effect through media, through cartoons, through like television, and how like we first and foremost disrespect our elders, but then also how we kind of disrespect that kind of leads over to like disrespecting our imams and disrespecting our shuyukh. Like just on like group chats, bro, like WhatsApp chats, it's kind of odd. It's kind of like, cause like I see it, I'm like, yo, like it's not how you talk to, that's not how you talk to Shaykh, that's not how you talk to his dad, that's not how you talk to imam, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just odd because I feel as though like that colonized, you know, media that we get completely inundating our brains leads to like how we translates to how we talk to people of knowledge. And you can't rebuild your community if you're not even rebuilding the adab inside of yourself, right? So it's just odd, man. I mean, and I've always been taught that you learn adab while you're sitting with your shuyukh, right? You learn adab while you're going through, you know, basic Islamic, you know, knowledge. Yeah, man, it's just odd because we have this like this new phenomena too of where Islam is kind of like more focused on presenting yourself as a good person and like how you interact with people and being all happy and stuff, and that's fine, right? Adab and akhlaq is part of it. So I know it's kind of like tangential and it's kind of two-pronged, but we kind of forget also like the ibadah that comes with it too. So it's sorry, man, it's kind of convoluted. But yeah, just going back to the other part, like how can we kind of like assist our youth in building that so that way they're more effective in how they want to change their community.
Yeah, that's a good point. And you'll find though that even imams, they can't talk about what they want to talk about, like what they call controversial matters. I mean, physical abuse at home or mental abuse, things between the spouses. A lot of things you're not really, or if you do, you have to kind of have like a small, like you can't really give khutbah about it, right? And if that's the problem, or if that's the situation we have, how can we expect like good results, right? You need to be able to actually teach, like, the Islamic values. But today, maybe again, going back to the colonized mindset and how we need to just kind of be with the people. Because if you taught true Islam, I mean, it's really problematic for the West, right? I mean, because it doesn't really go together with freedom of speech, freedom of, action, freedom of expression. No, we're limited in that, obviously that actually allows us to practice Islam more here, but you need to be able to teach the true Islamic values and not this kind of watered down approach where, for whatever reason, that Islamic organization doesn't want you to talk about. It's too controversial. We want people to come, right? We want the youth to come. So you just kind of, maybe focus on other things like a basketball court and, just, pizza and so on. But it's actually bigger than that. We need to teach the adab. We need to teach the morals, the way, the true way of life of Islam. But today, sadly, we can't.
It ties into like a compartmentalization of Islam too. Like Islam is for the mosques, and doesn't really have to deal with much outside of that, right? Like one of the communities that I'm more familiar with, so I know a little bit of what goes on in people's homes a little bit too. If I go to the mosque in that community, it's all like domestic abusers in the first row, of prayer. And
hold up.
You'd be surprised. A lot of mosques, man. Like a lot of the people who front as the most like religious in a community.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah,
I can personally vouch for that.
Whether man or not, like the woman.
And the thing is, those people are still Muslims. They need to hear that they're doing things wrong from the mosque before they hear it from the CPS and are dragged to court by their families, But yeah, if the imams don't have the freedom to like discuss that for fear of losing donations, then it's just a full like capitalization of the process, right? Like turning the whole mosque into a business. SubhanAllah.
Yeah, even like you mentioned, many focus just on, okay, I come to the masjid, I wear my hat when I come in, I wear my thobe, mashallah, and I'm in the first row, right? But beyond that, it's really just, terrible manners, the way they interact, no smiling, it's just, so.
They don't even smell good.
Yeah.
In fact, they smell bad.
So they really made Islam just, really superficial. Like, it's just like, okay, I pray. And also they feel really good about themselves because they pray. And people, and like, they'll actually criticize others But it's like the other people they actually might pray at home, for example, have better manners. That's actually more important. But they don't actually realize that, understand. And again, a lot of these things need to be addressed more in the masajid and Islamic organization. But again, it hurts people's feelings, and people will stop coming probably after that. So that's the reality.
Yeah, they feel good because they pray and they force their daughter to wear hijab, without explaining anything about it to her.
Exactly.
And she takes it off when she goes to school
SubhanAllah.
anyway. It'd really be like that.
That's true, man.
In conclusion, like, obviously, we thank you very much for giving us your time.
No, it's nothing at all.
Anything that you'd like to promote on our podcast to our few listeners? Anything going on?
No. I'm just happy to be here.
Or any words of advice for our listeners to wrap up, inshallah?
No, it's just about, especially for the Muslims, to be proud of their religion, right? And you always recall the incident with Umar ibn Khattab, of course, coming into modern-day Palestine with, of course, Abu Ubaidah, which is one of the 10 promised Jannah. And he was saying, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, why don't you just fix up yourself a little bit? You're going to meet so-and-so. And Umar ibn Khattab was like really upset. Right, and he was just saying, like, if there was anyone else that said that about me, I would have just, have to beat them up a little bit, right? And I understand that both of them are 2 promised Jannah of the 10, right? And of course, he said the famous thing, right? عزنا الله بالإسلام, right? ومن ابتغى غير الإسلام دينا أذله الله, أو كما قال عمر الخطاب. In that if Allah gave us honor, especially the Arabs, right? Not because of the language, because of Islam. And if you sought anything other than Islam, right, with regards to honor and dignity, then Allah is going to, bring you down and humiliate you. So that's really, if you don't take anything else and you just take that, you really would take a lot. That, the true honor is with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with the Quran, with the Prophet ﷺ's the Sunnah, right? And, the West, are going to be the West. And ultimately, they want you to lose your deen, right? That's the only thing that's going to make them make you happy or make them happy. And we're not going to give them that, inshallah, because we're going to hold on to the religion, even if it's difficult. And there's more reward, of course, with that struggle. So, alhamdulillah, so that's really the key there, is to hold on to the religion no matter what.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the 4th Podcast, brought to you by Morisco. If you haven't already, go ahead and give us a follow on Instagram and Twitter, and have a great rest of your day.